All right, welcome back after lunch. Please come forward, grab your seats. We're about ready to start the next panel. For those that are outside, if you can grab a friend with you and bring them in with you, that would be great. And we're going to get started in 3 minutes. Thank you. All right, we are going to start our next very exciting panel. And in your programs, you will see George Samano will be making introductions, but we've had a very dynamic board meeting. I think they're still in the board meeting, and I am covering the part of George. So tell him I did a great job when he comes in, okay? Thank you, I appreciate the support. All right, so if we could get our speakers to come up, that would be great. And I will introduce them as they come sit down on stage. So go ahead and come up and sit down, and I will introduce you. So the next panel is really an introduction and overview of smart cities. Ideas on how and why public power can be an integral part of development of a smart city and a smart community. This includes some very interesting case studies, city visions, initiation, development. We have some examples of pilot programs to demonstrate how important technological advances can really increase in the value and importance when members are considering the future of a smart city. SCPPA has developed a great panel of industry experts to introduce you to these issues, and I would like to introduce you to each one of them briefly Now, all of their complete biographies are in your programs, and just hold your applause while I go through the introductions. So with me on stage and leading off today's panel, we have Juliet Shavit, CEO and President of SmartMark Communications, a globally recognized strategic communications firm. Juliet is also the founder of Smart Energy IP, a consultancy that helps utilities and stakeholders understand the customer benefits of large-scale technology investment. Smart Energy recently prepared and published for the American Public Power Association, Creating a Smart City Roadmap for Public Power Utilities. Has everybody seen that Smart Cities brochure? It was very simple, easy to understand. A few of you, I think it really started a great dialogue. And the narrative was on key questions to consider in the process of implementing a Smart Cities program. We encourage you and your staff to review it if you've not already. Juliet, we are excited to have you here today, so thank you. So next to Juliet, we're actually on the far end, we have Duku Lee, General Manager of Anaheim Public Utilities and former SCPPA Board President. Duku is a registered professional electrical engineer who comes to us with over 25 years experience in the utility industry. As General Manager of Anaheim Utility, that serves 35,000 residents, 15,000 businesses, and over 24 million visitors annually. Do you get free passes to Disneyland, Duku? That's what we all want to know. 350,000 residents. Thank you. I actually read it correctly here, but 350,000 residents. All right. Duku will be providing us with a case study on Anaheim's initiation of a smart city. So Duku, thank you for breaking away from the board meeting and to be here. We appreciate it. Next to Duku, we have Scott Spagnola, who is key driver of smart city strategy, development, and partnership for T-Mobile. He has worked with cities and solution partners to put technology in the ground and bring Internet of Things solutions to life. We have Scott here today speaking of what it takes to build smart cities and T-Mobile's smart community pilot programs. And Scott, also, thank you. And I've missed one. So let me check my notes here very quickly. Here we go, I have it. Lastly, wrapping up the panel, we have George Karianis, okay, Executive Director of Panasonic, Cindy Dow. George has 30 years of emerging technology and complex solution leadership experience at Fortune 100 firms and high-tech startups. George currently leads Panasonic's City Now Connected and Resilient Communities team focused on utilities and real estate developers. George has authored a book on ISO 37120. Has everyone read that book? I have not. I am guilty. Standard for Smart City Indicators and is a lead accredited professional. The title of George's presentation today is Creating Connected, Resilient, and Equitable Communities Through Multi-Stakeholder Applied Innovation. And I'm excited to hear this and all of the presentations. So thank you, George, and let's give our panel a round of applause. So with that, we can get started. Thank you.
Is this the clicker? Okay. Hello. Hello, I'm Juliet Shavit, President of SmartMark Communications, and thank you all for having me today. Before I dive deep into this presentation, I kind of want to respond to some of the things that I heard earlier today. One, that the environment we're in right now feels like an anaconda. I'm here to probably contradict that, and I'm really sorry. I think that the environment we're in right now is like the super most exciting time ever in the entire world. so let's see if we can feel that way at the end of today. The other thing is I'm really here to talk to you about sticking with what you know. I feel that part of the reason I feel that this is the most super exciting time in the world is that everyone, the best people to create a smart city and the future for energy are sitting in this room. So I feel pretty good about that. I heard some pretty smart people this morning with all kinds of doctorates and all kinds of analyses. I'm not going to have any charts and numbers in my presentation. I'm going to talk to you about what it really takes to build a smart city. And I think that is confidence, that you know what you're doing. Okay, so SmartMark Communications is a 20-year-old company. Everyone's life is sort of like a ping pong match. Mine started, for some reason, in emerging communications technology around wireless networks. This was 20 years ago, so a lot of really cool things were happening in wireless, sort of changed the world. My second client was in the utility billing space. which was totally different. I watched two industries grow, transform, evolve, and converge. So I'm really excited because they converge in the world of smart city. I am probably most known for my advocacy in AMI customer education. I work with utilities of all sizes on the important role that customers play to adopting new technology and engaging with new technology, because this low carbon future, this energy efficient tomorrow, is only 50% technology and 50% customers making behavioral changes. Let's see, I wrote the Smart City White Paper for APPA, and I do a lot in smart home, and I believe that I'm working on pilots right now that are as exciting as end-to-end smart home that includes music and entertainment right together with energy efficiency and coupling an end-to-end 360 experience in the home. I feel that the utility future is really undefined and very exciting if we can leverage and optimize our existing investments and open our minds. So I'm going to start with the Jetsons, because I'd say the first take at Smart City probably happened in 1962. I think the fact that the Jetsons was created in 1962 is quite remarkable, actually. It wasn't for 10 more years that there was a company called Microsoft or another company called Apple. So in 1962, people that were not technologists built this future. And what did we see? We saw smart watches, we see FaceTime, we see devices that do things for us, and we see robots, and we see advanced transportation systems, all of which are part of today's smart city. And that was early in 1962. If those people had an imagination. Today is a very exciting time for consumers. So part of what California really, I believe, really needs to open its mind to is the idea that there's a precedent here around early AMI deployments that people are afraid of technology. I would argue that is not the case. People are afraid of lack of information and lack of education around what is happening. Today, there are new levels of connectivity, and most people are open to them. Unprecedented levels of personalization and customization. You can go on Amazon right now and order just about anything, and if you haven't thought of it, it will tell you what you need to order. There is the world of IoT, right? Everything is connected in ways we never would have imagined, very much like the Jetsons. We have artificial intelligence, augmented reality, virtual reality, smart devices, we have tracking. You know, it's really an amazing time for technology. I call it the technology renaissance. So the connected future, ensuring that it's smart. So in this maze of technologies that I just talked about, it is really important for utilities and businesses to weed through the blur to see which technologies are most worthwhile and what are the key factors in determining what's a worthwhile investment. You know, how do we build upon the investments that you've already made? Many of you have rolled out AMI, many of you have invested significantly in grid modernization. How do you optimize these investments to platform off of them, to springboard off of them and use them as a platform for smart city? Where do the utilities go for here? Is there a utility of the future roadmap? You know, what is the role of public power utilities in smart city? And that's what we're really going to talk through. So I can list all the things we're going to talk about, but I'll just start talking about them. Okay, I'm really glad we're in Studio City. I heard a lot of really fun analogy this morning. I'm going to play a little game with you guys. These are 4 smart cities. Can anyone identify any of them? Any Avengers fans around here? Marvel comics? Okay, the top left is the city of Kree from Captain Marvel, which was released, I think, last month, so pretty timely. Underneath it to the left is Wakanda from Black Panther. To the right, top right is the city from Star Wars, Galactic City, and the bottom should look pretty familiar. It's Tomorrowland from Disneyland. So people have different images of what a smart city is. But there is something that really does unify all of these cities, and that is the electrification of the city. All of these cities are powered, and I think, you know, we talk about, I have 3 kids, so I have to make what I do kind of interesting. And you think about, you know, how do you make electricity sexy? How do you make electricity and engagement in energy behavior and, you know, technology around energy interesting to the new generation? Well, Marvel's doing a darn good job because their entire foundation and series is focused on the energy source, right? Wakanda is entirely powered by its natural resources. So the conversation is really relevant in timing. It's really up to us, I think, to make it interesting and engaging. But first, let's start with what is a smart city. I think I was asked to say, what is Smart City 101? So Merriam-Webster defines the word smart as to have knowledge. Right, today, I think if you ask the average person on the street what is smart, they'd say, well, it's definitely wireless. And if any of you have been to the Consumer Electronics Show like I have, you put a wireless chip in something, it is called wireless. Wireless does not mean smart. I've seen many things that connect to the internet that solve no problems whatsoever. And also, smart does not have to be connected. If I need to walk from one block to the other, I definitely can get my mobile app, and by the time I've called for an Uber to take me there, which could be an autonomous vehicle, it would be faster for me to just walk there. So sometimes the smartest solution is not always the most technology advanced solution, and I think that's really important to remember with smart cities. And I'd also like to say that when we're talking about smart cities and utilities do have access now to lots of information. So today's definition of smart, if you leverage technology, if you take the technology component, is if you insert or you adopt a new technology component to a smart city, what sorts of real-time data can you get, what type of information can you get by putting this technology in that makes the people governing the city make smarter decisions? Because it's people that are smart, not places. So cities that leverage advanced technologies and real-time information to solve citywide problems and enhance the lives of residents. That's what I came up with. I would bet if you interviewed every single person in this room, we'd all have a different definition of what smart city is. And that's part of that whole fear of anaconda. Is there a holy grail solution to smart city? And I'd like to say absolutely, positively not. Cities are absolutely different. They have similar types of challenges, but they have very many different challenges. So, if you look at my advice, if I was in a situation, I don't know if I would let the anaconda swallow my toes or feet, but I'm pretty sure I'd pick out like a pipe and start playing some music, because I think that if you harness the power of the technology and what's the disruption that's happening around you, you can do some tremendous things. And to have it on your side is quite powerful. So back to there's no holy grail for smart city. Smart cities are by definition different, because cities are different. Every single city has a different problem. You could be a landlocked city. You could be a port. You could have a major metro. You cannot. You can be urban. You can be rural. How could possibly all the problems of each of these each of these cities be the same? They're not, and that's the point. Smart city is a very personal thing to a city, and a public power utility plays a critical role as part of the government of the city, as part of the bare bones of the city, to understand your problems better than anyone else in the city, and understand your role in powering that city, and to help define what this smart city looks like. But at the same time, there are some commonalities. If you were to draw, if you were on to do modeling, I know there's a lot of people who do some modeling here, connectivity, sustainability, reliability, transportation, there are some things that are the same. But when you drill down to the granular level, most cities are quite different. And to hammer that point home, I was reading, okay, well, how are other people identifying who is smart? So I picked 3 totally different cities that are considered the 3 top smart cities in the world, and they do totally different things. Amsterdam is recognized for advancements in urban planning. Completely not energy efficiency. Vienna is excellence in green energy for having its southern districts 100% on renewables since 2015. Huge accomplishment, super smart, totally different than Amsterdam. And then Boston has great public management systems, and they do have high-speed internet availability and good accessibility all around. Again, some editor out there from a big magazine decided to pick these 3, and none of them are the same. So why are public power utilities uniquely positioned to play a role? If the goal of the smart city is to leverage technology to solve problems and make our lives better, then the utility plays the most critical role because you power it. You as a utility touch all lives of the city, all aspects of the city, the people, the transportation, businesses, productivity. You power the city. So you're not adjacent to the conversation. It's not like, okay, if you listen in on it. You really need to be engaged in this conversation. You probably should be leading it. So here's my little diagram of a smart city. It has all kinds of things that are familiar to you. I chose some key topics to make this, to make this information more easy to consume: connectivity, reliability, sustainability, transportation, and economy. We see renewables, we see technology. I've got a drone flying up there. Future transportation, we have electric vehicles, and we have AMI with smart meters out there. So, this is one, I would say this is a really flavorless version of a smart city. I would hope that every single person, every single utility in the room has a much more specific diagram focused on the needs of their community. Okay, so I talked a little bit about why you shouldn't get involved. You are naturally central to the ecosystem, and you have existing relationship with most of the players. That makes this job really easy. Your relationship with your customers is key, and it should be of utmost importance. You've already invested in infrastructure improvement. Hey, somebody's going to come around and say, why'd you spend all that money? Why'd you have a rate increase on this? You put in all this infrastructure. What are you going to do with it now? Your reputation matters. And whether you're aware of it or not, there's somebody on the executive team who's probably trying to figure out what their future roadmap looks like for the utility, and smart cities is critical to the utility of the future roadmap. And what happens if you don't? Let's say, okay, I'll leave it to somebody else to do. I assure you that there are a lot of players out there that want to come in and do what you do in some aspect, deliver some level of service. They're also going to take away business models and opportunities that are potential to you that you can't optimize because someone's going to come in and take them away from you. These business models are incredibly important, incredibly exciting, and they will help sustain long-term technology investment. So we'll come back to that. Some of your core services will be at risk, and new services will be at risk. So I talked a little bit about this future business model for utilities. Let's see. So understanding what this business model is and how to invest in technology, you have to put the customer first. If customers are at the heart of your technology investment, then the business case will be very easy to follow. I heard this morning the term operational efficiency, I don't know, half a dozen times. I remember when the early utilities were rolling out AMI, every utility thought it was a great idea to message to customers that they were improving operational efficiency for the utility by rolling out smart meters. Who cares? The only people that is benefiting in that solution are the utilities. So understanding what the customer role will help you in not only investing in technology, but making sure the community accepts it and adopts it and engages with it. We saw that stretchy doll this morning. I would venture to say that if you work with the stakeholders in a smart city ecosystem and on the planning early on versus in a reactive capacity, you're less likely to feel some of that pressure. In fact, you'll probably feel a little bit of release on those arms because the stakeholders that you're trying to fight with, you're now aligning with. It prevents a much less stressful situation. That doll looked pretty stressed out. This is a much less stressful situation when you're collaborating with your stakeholders. And that's really what Smart City is all about, and building that ecosystem. Let's see. In California, there has been a history of technology backlash in key investments, particularly around smart meters. I can't emphasize how important it is to work with your stakeholders on your technology roadmaps and on articulating the benefits and helping. If you as a utility are not sure how to articulate those benefits, then get in the room with some of your stakeholder groups and other pieces of the economy, of the local economy, to determine what those benefits are, because articulating those benefits for the city, for the community, with the customers in the middle of this technology swirl is key to success. And also working with customers and stakeholders, you can help also develop education. Not only do you want to educate your stakeholders, you want to educate your consumers. You don't want them to reject the investments that you're making in technology. You want them to support it. You want them to engage with it. And we're also going to see the emergence of new business models and if you engage with some of these different ecosystem players. Okay, So how do you get started? You go back, you say, okay, there was this girl, she talked about smart city, she said it was really easy to do. So what do I do? One thing just as a temperature check is I gave a webinar recently for SCPPA, and we did like a real-time survey, and about 6% of the participants of the public power utility said they had some level of smart city activity going on. When I asked how many were intending to develop a plan or start some smart city activity, that number went from 6 to 30%. In the course of 2 minutes. I thought that was pretty astonishing. It just means that your colleagues all over the country are very engaged in smart city right now. Where do you start when you get overwhelmed? You just start with a mission and write it down. What's your goal? And remember that your goal, whether that's to improve the lives of customers, whether that is environmental goals, whether that is citywide, just start with a goal. Start with a goal for your utility first. You will ultimately develop that goal for smart city with your other ecosystem players, but start with your goal as a utility. What do you want to do? And then develop an internal project management team to achieve utility goals and then to work with stakeholders. This is also really important. So when you're building a plan to start collaborating in a more formal way with your stakeholders on smart city activities, make sure you have all kinds of intellectual expertise in the room. You don't just want the metering team in the room. You just don't want the engineers in the room. You want to invite the communications people in the room. They may be very valuable in helping articulate those benefits and talking to people, and even helping develop a pretty picture that you can show people what you're doing. You know, having the the EE people in the room, the environmental efficiency people in the room, having the transportation in the room. You want an ecosystem, you want a PMO that includes stakeholders from each parts of the utility, because it's each part of the utility that is an expert in what they do, and each part of that utility makes up basically what that smart city activity is going to look like for the utility. And then obviously that PMO would work hand in hand with your customers and stakeholders and city government to identify the benefits and determine what investments are necessary for smart city. So start at the beginning, set up a meeting, bring that little PMO office, send out an email to a couple people in different departments, hey, do you want to have a brainstorming session? See where it goes, jot a couple notes down, say, you know, it'd be really cool if we had a smart city initiative. If we did, what do you think it could look like, right? What do you think it could look like? You give that to a smart marketing person, it could turn into a mission statement really fast. Once you've got a mission statement and you kind of figure out what you're trying to do, then you start to begin that conversation with external stakeholders and city government to identify common concerns. Okay, so I happen to be an advocate for having a roadmap. You know, what is a smart city roadmap and why should a public power utility have one? Because each utility is unique, as we said, each utility must have its own roadmap. You cannot have one roadmap for all utilities. It may have common large categories that we talked about earlier, sustainability and transportation and reliability, but those roadmaps have to be very unique to solve the specific problems of the city. And that roadmap also maps out the utility's goals and how those goals might envision what the utility wants to be when it grows up as that utility of the future. And it helps just define a path forward. So how do you start building a roadmap? You develop a working group, that PMO that we talked about of internal stakeholders, and then you invite some external stakeholders to the table. You talk through what you want in your communities. It's a communication. Half of smart city building is communication and half is technology. I just want to say one really interesting story that I heard last week when I had a conversation with somebody. You know, I was building a user interface and on something that was for a smart home interface we were doing, and I had the developer on the phone. And I kept saying to him, I have a picture. And he said to me, you have a picture? He goes, we love pictures. We can build anything in the entire world. It's the picture that we don't have. And it was so mind-boggling for me that I could develop like a stick drawing and this man could go build the systems. He said technology is easy. There are a lot of really good technologists. It's knowing what to do with that technology that is really crucial. It's the hardest part. It's the magic sauce. Who knows better what to do with that technology than in a utility environment than you guys? So I would be less afraid of those snakes. I would be more interested in first defining, even if it's a stick drawing, what you want out of this. What do you want to do? How do you envision the smart city? Those smart people that can build it, they'll come later. They're easier to find. There's a billion of them out there right now. They build all kinds of cloud platforms. They will come knocking, I promise. But very important, put the customer first and the future of technology will become clear. Again, just stick to this message because it is the one that I can't advocate enough. Okay, if you actually were to think about what designing a utility roadmap, I have a pretty picture here. It's also in the SCPPA white paper, but you want to do two things in tandem. You want to make a list of utility goals, and you want to make a list of customer goals. And you want to do them at the same time. I put them of equal importance. And then you want to figure out what are the citywide goals. And when you look at what the synergies are between those three things, you kind of can figure out pretty quickly what role the utility is playing in making those things happen. It's as simple as that. If you can do that level of analysis, and you do that analysis with your stakeholders in the community, so you're all on the same page, you got yourself a smart city roadmap. Making sure, no matter what, that those goals are customer-centric, and then take a look at your infrastructure assets, look at what control you have over services, where are those current synergies, and then think about where do you want to be in 5 years, and then where do you want to be long-term. And you really have just developed yourself a roadmap. And then what could a smart city look like? Is it going to look like Wakanda? Probably not. Focus on your unique city challenges. Must understand at the bottom line, after all this technology analysis, after all these business cases, after all these customer assessments, how is this going to better the community? Make sure you can distill your goal in 2 sentences, maybe. If you can do it in 1, that's even better. But keep it short. At the end of the day, how is my smart city vision going to better my community? And how am I going to leverage my assets, my investments, my infrastructure? How am I going to do that to make my city better? And then how can I articulate that? And use your customers as your compass. I did a quick case study. You're going to have much more relevant case studies. I picked CPS Energy only because it wasn't in California. And they have a program called their Flexible Path program. And according to their CEO, she says, we want to implement new strategies around embracing and enabling new technology while leveraging our community-owned generation assets to achieve a future with more renewables and technology like energy storage. That was her definition. That was CPS's definition of their smart city program. And they specifically, in terms of what they were doing to fulfill that, they were building some microgrids. They had air quality data collection. They were putting LEDs in street lamps, solar and energy storage pilots, EV charging deployment, and obviously specialty pricing, like dynamic pricing and time of use. Okay, so I'm just going to I'll finally close up with some next steps. I'm here to say, go back, bring out your little pipes that harness that anaconda, and make the case for smart city, and explain how critical it is to your stakeholders about the utility of the future. Begin internally about how you can leverage your existing assets and optimize existing investments before you seek out and get too scared about what else is out there. Designate responsibilities. If you are limited in resources, to choose 2 things: a project manager with technology background and a communications person, and put them together. Because that communications person is not to be overlooked. The ability to articulate the benefits, express them to stakeholders and to consumers of all kinds is critical to the success of the adoption of the technology. Develop a mission statement, consider building a roadmap like we talked about with some key milestones, and have confidence that you are the most prepared to do this. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Duku Lee, General Manager for Anaheim Public Utilities. And before I came here to this conference, I was thinking about 2 different camps when it comes to the topic of smart cities, and it's really kind of played out the way that I thought. One camp considers smart city the next thing. Exciting, you heard about a great presentation before me, interest in really pushing our communities forward. The other camp, not so much. It's not a core competency necessarily for a public utility, and so are we dabbling in a space maybe that we're not supposed to be? Maybe this is more general fund type stuff that the city should be looking at as opposed to a utility. And if I'm being honest, I have a camp in both camp. I have a feet in both camps. Sorry about that. What happened with us in Anaheim is that one of our council members came to us last summer and asked us, could we start to engage in a smart city program? And she had some ideas on what it would look like and wanted to engage the utility to take a leadership role. And I thought about that, and there's other departments who do technology on a citywide basis, so why did you come to the utility? She was interested in connectivity, safety. She said something about how it's close to, 80% now that people make 911 calls from their mobile phones as opposed to a landline. And so there's a lot more people cutting the cord to their homes. And so there's a lot of that future casting that she was doing, and she wanted the utility, who has a history of deploying technologies in a thoughtful manner, to take the initiative. And so we did that. So over the course of the summer, in a couple of months, we started to engage other departments in the city and figure out, how do we want to develop something that's going to work for our community? What makes sense for the city of Anaheim, considering all the different things that are going on? And what I found out is, going through that journey, is we have a lot of the foundational assets that are necessary for a smart city. The two in particular, fiber optics and streetlights. So how do we leverage those things in order to develop a platform or a roadmap that makes sense and that could bring, in an inclusive manner, other departments together? So here's one definition where we came up with it. There's a lot of different definitions out there. It does look quite different to other communities depending on what you're considering. So I'm going to go through what we did and a little bit about our journey. But before I do that, I wanted to start with, what is not a smart city, just so that we can be clear. So a couple of examples. Here's one example. So contrary to what you may be thinking, this is not the Bureau of Streetlights in Los Angeles. But somewhere in the world, an engineer or a planner, somebody put protect in place on a set of plans, and then the architect was apparently passive-aggressive, and this is what came out of that. There's another one, not smart city. This is not in Anaheim. If it was, this person would run right into the pole, and 2 days later, we'd have a claim. Here's the last example. So this is a cul-de-sac. This one is in Anaheim. So we were not always a smart city. So if you notice, the street light is in the middle of a cul-de-sac. Not the best planning. So there's a couple theories on how this came about. One was that whoever was designing the streetlight system wanted it to be the most efficient, cost-effective methodology. And there you go, one streetlight, right? You don't need two streetlights. One streetlight would take care of that. The other theory is that there was a pissing contest between Public Works and Public Utilities, and this is what came out of it. What about too smart, too fast? So this is what happened with Google, right? They wanted to do their smart city types of initiatives where they deploy fiber optics throughout neighborhoods, and they were doing this micro-trenching thing where they would put fiber optics 2 inches underneath the roadway. Didn't work out too well, certainly in Louisville, and they ended up settling out for about $3.8 million to fix what they had done. But to put it into perspective, $3.8 million is their espresso and latte budget for Google, so really not too big of an impact to them. So this is what we ended up doing. In Anaheim, we came up with these goals. Our council member helped develop these goals based on some of the aspirational vision that certainly that she had, and then we ended up sharing this with our full council in November. So we wanted to start with, where are we? What have we done that really lend itself to smart cities? And so I wanted to show you a couple pictures, because what I needed to do with the rest of our city council is tell them we're not starting from ground zero. In fact, this is a picture of our traffic management control center in Anaheim, where we have an 80-mile fiber loop that connects traffic signals, and you can see videos of what's going on. It's my city manager to the left and the traffic management manager to the right explaining the system. On top of this, the utility has our own 80-mile fiber loop. And so we do it obviously for SCADA control monitoring, both for our electric system and as well as our water systems. So there's a lot of operational needs that we have it. But we have 160 miles of fiber between the two departments that we can use and start to leverage for all sorts of other cool things. This is something that utilities are aware of. This happens from time to time. You end up blocking a major arterial because there's something going on with one of your poles or infrastructure that's causing an outage. We have a system called Anaheim Alert, and what it is a subscription-based, free subscription, but if you are a resident or a business in Anaheim, you can sign up for this and get a text alert or an email that says, hey, there's going to be a road blocked from this time to this time, or there's a power outage in this specific area, and if you put in your address, it could be that specific and tell you if you're affected. So this has been really helpful to notify people about what's going on, whether it's an emergency event or something else. We have our own app. Anaheim has a My Anaheim app, and there's an alert system, Anaheim alert system, that's built into this, and the most common use of this app is actually graffiti removal. And so people could go on there. It's has GPS enabled in there, so you can just click on it and say where you want a service performed. In the app, if you press a special code, you end up getting the general manager to come out there and clean up the graffiti for you. I was getting a little bit tired of this, so we've moved on from that to this anti-graffiti wrap, so we're getting a little bit smarter. Smart cities have and use data effectively, and so we've been doing this for a number of years, and so this is our streetlight repair response time. So this is something that actually Manny started while he was in operations for us, and we started tracking because it was not uncommon to go multiple weeks before we get to a resident's request. But with the app and making it easier for people to make those requests, we started to document and track all of those, and you can see the number of requests have gone down as well as our response time over the years. And then you have to communicate how you're using your technologies. And so what we do is we have basically a report card that we designate every twice a year, and we talk about the things that we've done. This is one example of it, customer satisfaction. People who use the app can put in, they'll get a survey at the end of their service, and they can respond back and say, what did they think about how we performed? And I see every single one of these surveys, and so if there's something that we need to follow up on, we can actually go back and address a poor performance or something that needs a little bit extra attention. So we're not starting from zero with a smart city in Anaheim. So we took in what we're doing collectively between different departments, what the utility does, and then we came up with this as our roadmap. And what I appreciate about these categories is they're broad. You can fit a lot of different types of things under them, and I think we as utilities can appreciate that policymakers, regulators, legislators tend to want to not just give you the destination, they want to give you turn-by-turn directions to get to that destination, and then they want to ask you to report on that so that they can figure out some type of a penalty structure for whether or not you met whatever goals you have. And so the flexibility in this, in our roadmap was something that we were very conscious about. So I'll go through these four categories very briefly. You can read on here some of the different things. I'm sure you're going to get a much better explanation of the 5G. But for us, what we were trying to convey to our policymakers is trying to distill it into something pretty simple. So here's an example. How long would it take to download a 2-hour-long movie? And for 3G, it did take 26 hours to download that. With 4G, down to about 6 minutes. And 5G, the promise is 3.6 seconds that it's done almost immediately. Okay? But there's challenges associated with that. What we're seeing, and I'm sure many of your communities are seeing, is an impact on our infrastructure. So this is not in Anaheim, but this is one of those things that we have to be very mindful of because aesthetics, it does matter to our policymakers certainly and to our residents. Nobody wants to live next to something like this. So we end up trying to put specifications, standards, we work with the carrier partners, and it really is a partnership to try to find solutions that work both for them as well as our communities so that we can have all these great services provided to our customers. Safety is something that's part of our culture. It's part of who we are as public utilities. But we don't do a really good job of being top of mind when it comes to safety, right? We usually leave that to our first responders, even though we have our own first responders. So something we've been doing in Anaheim a lot more is really trying to be more conscientious about getting the message out that we're part of the solution when it comes to safety. So in Anaheim, we've had issues with homelessness over the last 5 years or so, and it's an ongoing challenge. But one of the things that people were concerned about is homeless people would be at their business, in their front yards, and they'd be doing things, they'd leave needles. It was just not a good situation. So we got a lot of requests for, hey, can you increase lighting in this particular area? And it helped us because we got a request, as opposed to us blanketing the city in one shot, to be able to be more responsive to the needs and to be able to address where certain pockets of people did not want LED lighting for whatever reasons. So these are some examples. This is Beach Boulevard, an iconic roadway. And Beach Boulevard, over the years, what happened to it is it's very different. If you were to go to Buena Park's part of Beach Boulevard, Knott's Berry Farm, a lot of retail, commercial, and it's very vibrant and well lit, et cetera. You drive down to this 1.5 mile stretch in Anaheim, and it looks significantly different. A lot of seedy motels, there was drugs, prostitution, and so now the city is making a very concerted effort to put a specific plan to liven this up, to redevelop the area, and make it a little bit nicer than it currently is. And the city and the utility had a role in helping with lighting. We're also planning and designing our undergrounding project in the same stretch of roadway. The other thing that we just got approved on Tuesday is wildfire cameras. We hear that there's a lot of risk associated with wildfires, certainly with the investor owns. And for Anaheim, we've had our share of wildfires. On the eastern part of our service territory, there's some undeveloped areas, and the fires start there and then move towards the homes. And so with the Canyon 2 fire that happened in a couple years ago, what happened is we lost about 25 homes, and there's about 9,000 acres that were burned. And so we started working with our first responders, Anaheim Fire and Rescue, and we collaborated with them on a system where we can install these cameras that gives us a lot more visibility to address wildfires. And this was very positively received by both the council member who lives in that district, as well as a lot of the constituents who are worried about the next fire. So that's something that we're trying to be very mindful of and help with safety in the city. Intelligent, what's the difference between intelligent and smart? It's basically the same thing, but we needed something that's a little bit of a catch-all category for some of the different things that didn't quite fit in the other areas. So one of the things that I mentioned before and you've seen throughout is the use of streetlights. So it can be that platform for a lot of different services, smart city-wise, safety. One of the things that we're doing in our resort areas, we're looking at directional signage, something that gives better mobility and improves traffic flow. And with the opening of Star Wars Land at the end of this month, we currently have about 25 million visitors into Anaheim on an annual basis. So this is before Star Wars Land. And then there's been an announcement that there's going to be Marvel-themed attractions at California Adventure in 2020. So we're not going to see that 25 million number go down. It's going to go up. So it's a question of how much and how fast. And so we're thinking about things like directional signage along with our Public Works Department to help. And if you have the ability to have communications on these streetlights as well, it's going to go a long way. Just to put that 25 million number into perspective, that's about 68,000 people per day that's in this resort area. So that's not including employees. So if you talk about the resort employees, hotels, Disneyland, and the other businesses in that area, you're talking about another 30 to 40,000 people on top of the visitors. So that's about 100,000 people just in a fairly concentrated area on a daily basis, right? That's like taking the population of Banning, Colton together and adding it to Anaheim every day. So it is something that we're very mindful of. All right, I mentioned Star Wars Land. This is my electric vehicle. So it can do the Kessel Run in 12 parsecs, but it's very difficult to park. I have no idea what a Kessel Run or a parsec is, I saw it on a Saturday Night Live skit, and so it just sounded cool. But what am I talking about with Star Wars Land? So there is an attraction within this new theme park where you have this type of a vehicle, and there's no tracks. And so inside of this, there's going to be a transmitter, and there's going to be embedded inside of the attraction in the roadway, transponders so that you can actually navigate these vehicles without having a track. So why is that significant to Anaheim and the utility? Well, a couple years ago, we had a very divisive issue on whether or not we were going to have some type of a last mile commuter system which would have some type of a track associated with it. And so if that were to happen, that would have a very significant impact to the utility, because everything below that track system, potentially I would have to relocate, or we'd have to move that track every single time we'd had to get into our infrastructure. So for us, looking at technologies like this, there's a definite benefit. And so our Public Works Department is considering this technology out in the public space. Now, the vehicle would look certainly different, and we wouldn't have a droid driving it, steering it, but the concept is there. The technology is essentially the same. Now, you'd have a lot more safety safeguards in there, but essentially the technology is there, and there's a lot of work going on with autonomous vehicles to get us to a place where life really imitates art. And the last area we've talked about extensively today, and that's sustainability. And there's a lot that our utilities can do collectively together to help push this along, certainly with smart city initiatives. So, we started at a very elementary level working with schools, doing simple things like competitions with solar panels, things like the Metropolitan Water District, solar boat competition, just to make sure that we started young and that our policymakers can see that, hey, the investments we're making in sustainability have a community benefit that they could get behind. I've had policymakers say, what are we doing with the electric vehicles? Those are just for rich Tesla people, right? It's not really for the common folks. And so having this ability to just explain the benefits of sustainability and where we're going with electric transportation really helps us drive some of these initiatives. So some of the things that are going on now in Anaheim with TE, the upper left photo is EV chargers that we helped incentivize at a residence where people who were previously homeless now reside, and they're on their way back to getting wraparound services and getting back to function in society. And so what we did was we looked at the usage, and there's not too many of them that are using electric transportation. So now we're considering car sharing programs and other things that we can do to really push that forward for income qualified customers. The picture on the bottom left is our Fran, so you can go on your app and call up Fran. So if you're ever in the packing house in downtown Anaheim, you can park wherever you want, pick up a Fran, and it'll take you to the final destination. And the photos on the right, we have fast chargers that we're deploying much like other communities in SCPPA. And the picture on the upper right shows our mayor getting behind and supporting a groundbreaking, or dedication, sorry, for that. And ultimately, we want to just continue to expand TE, whether it's fleets. We're talking very extensively internally about what would a school fleet program look like, what kind of infrastructure can we provide to school districts. So instead of onesie, twosie buses, now we can look at 70, 80 buses and what that can do. How can we facilitate something like that? Car sharing, private fleets, trying to promote electric transportation options for those as well. So that's a quick snapshot of what Anaheim's doing in some pretty broad categories. The rest of the city, they're looking at a lot of different types of things, a real-time crime center for police, all sorts of different technologies. We're trying to bring that together so that our policymakers can get behind the entire initiative. But the one thing I want to leave you with is that I don't think our customers today want affordability and reliability. So let me say that again. I don't think our customers today want affordability and reliability. I think they expect it. They expect it, and there's a big difference between those two words, right? When they expect it, something's not there, then they get angry. But what you've seen with other industries, even our telecommunication partners here, they've actually pushed their messaging so that you get value. That's what customers want. They want value out of a service. And so to the extent that we as public utilities can help create that value proposition, the lighting, the safety, the wildfire cameras, things like that, where people understand that when they're paying their $80 a month or whatever it is, they're getting a lot more than just affordability and reliability. I'm not saying they're not important, they're absolutely critical, but from a customer perspective, they expect that to happen. But when they make that payment each month, they want to see that they're getting more for their dollar. And I think that's one of the things that we could look at with smart city initiatives is how do we drive that value proposition so that our customers say, yes, I believe that whatever I'm paying on a monthly basis is absolutely worth it because of what I get in terms of all these other facets. So thank you very much for your attention. I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference and speakers.
Great. $80 for Verizon or AT&T, $50 for T-Mobile. So I'm Scott Spagnola. I drive our Smart Cities initiatives at T-Mobile. Really want to thank SCPPA for inviting us here today. I know it's a bit unconventional to have a mobile carrier present here. But frankly, I think we have some really relevant solutions that I'd like to talk about and really share a story about what we did with the city of LA. Apologies in advance for my voice. I don't typically sound like this, but getting over a little bit of a cold, so let's kick things off. So to your point, really how T-Mobile approaches smart cities is really that foundational network layer. So really laying the foundation, whether it's our existing 4G networks, 2G networks, even many of the sensors that you alluded to that utilize things like narrowband IoT, and forthcoming later this year and early next year, our 5G network that will help power a lot of the services that don't yet exist, including the 3.6-second downloads of an entire film. And then how we define smart communities, much like you shared, nearly everybody has a different definition of what a smart community or smart city is. Frankly, T-Mobile really wants to provide that network foundational layer by which you can build solutions or build different services that could help service the community and ultimately our customers as well. Because much like to your point, our focus is really on our clients and providing exceptional service. So that approach manifests itself really by working backwards from business cases, or rather business needs or use cases. Instead of us having a portfolio of solutions and trying to pitch all of you or sell you on things, frankly, we'd much rather understand what your challenges are, what you need to solve, whether it's for yourselves or whether it's for your clients, and work backwards from that and help solve it. Whether it's through connectivity directly from T-Mobile, or whether it's by engaging solution partners together with T-Mobile to bring that solution to market. Again, to that point, we like to partner with existing solution partners and really leverage what they've done and their expertise and combine that with our network. And then naturally by engaging and really understanding and listening to what all of you need and how we can help. So just to showcase some of the pilots that we've been working on since T-Mobile is relatively new to the smart city space. To my earlier point, we've worked really closely with a few folks in select cities. I know there's been a lot of talk today about wildfires and risk mitigation and cameras, for example. We also have a solution that we engaged directly with Ted Ross, the CTO of the city of LA, because of a growing issue of fires as a result of the homeless encampments in and around Skid Row. So as many of you probably know, there's about 30,000 homeless folks in that 1 mile square area. And there was a fire that resulted last summer that burned down one of the warehouses. And that private property owner approached the city and said, how can you help? So in turn, the city turned to us to ask if we could help with a solution, and we spun up a pilot to support this. And I'll showcase that in the next slide. Environmental monitoring, again, pretty usual suspect solution here, but it's powered by T-Mobile. I think it could help certainly in regard to fires, but also in many other scenarios in terms of providing the usual suspects of temperature and pressure and humidity and different gases, and monitoring those and providing actionable intelligence by which entities like yourself can make decisions based on. Autonomous vehicles, you heard a lot about today as well. we're currently engaged in a pilot with the city of Bellevue, which is where T-Mobile is headquartered. And frankly, our own campus is growing quite a bit. And so the city of Bellevue has a desire to launch an autonomous vehicle pilot. They've chosen to do so with T-Mobile, and that'll be in and around our campus to shuttle employees, and then probably expand into the city of Bellevue as well. Smart lighting, you heard about just prior. So we're also engaged in providing smart lighting solutions. And then things like object tracking and analytics. So this could really help in the instance of, for example, tracking people or vehicles at airports. Or, for example, we have a pair of these installed in one of our retail stores to understand not just how many people come in, but where do they go? What's the pathway that they take? How long do they spend there? So it could help optimize inside of a store, merchandising, or more importantly, for example, in an airport, what's the flow? Is the Starbucks line always 25 minutes? How can you make that better? So just a few different solutions in terms of what we're doing and pilots with different cities. Many of you know the situation here in California as it relates to the fires. These are some stats from CAL FIRE in terms of just sheer acres, burned. Sadly, some of the deaths that have occurred as a result, and the cost. These are mostly associated with CAL FIRE. Again, in terms of the cost, and nearly $800 million was spent just in the fiscal year of 2018 alone supporting the wildfires. Again, just a few more stats from the Woolsey fire, the Camp Fire, Mendocino. I'm sure many of you are very familiar with these stats. The reason I'm sharing this is to showcase, again, what we've done in the city of LA and how that can be expanded to support some of the conversations we're having now with Los Angeles County and the state of California. So as many of you may know, Gavin Newsom's office released an RFII. I love California because you always do things differently. So it's a request for innovative ideas, not just an RFI, about how different solution partners can provide solutions to help in this specific instance. And so we participated in that as well. But we think there's direct relevance in terms of the utilities and how T-Mobile can partner with some of you to help mitigate this concern in a more proactive way. Excuse me. So to that point, we've launched this early stage fire detection solution, again, working with Ted Ross and his team. They had a few specific requirements, and so in talking to them, because this was in a city environment, we really wanted to understand their needs, and the top three things were really, how can you automate these alerts so as to minimize the need for incremental people or staff? For example, with the cameras, great solution, provides a lot of situational awareness, but somebody needs to draw your attention to look at the camera to see what's happening. This is a solution that 24/7, 365 monitors the conditions within different areas that were being focused on. In this case, it was 5th and San Pedro and 5th and Stanford, right in the heart of Skid Row, where the LAFD knew there was quite a bit of activity. And so when there is an activity that, in this case, was over 220 degrees Celsius, an alert would occur. And it would occur via an SMS to about a dozen cell phones for this pilot, as well as a few seconds later, a static image that you see here in the top right. And in this case, the thermal imaging detector detected this about 5 minutes before somebody called in to 911. And in talking to Chief Suter a couple days after this, he mentioned that 5.5 minute head start in most scenarios would of course be quite significant for the fire department. The other thing that this provides is a certain degree of security and privacy. So you can see in the background, a little bit next to the trees, there's outlines of people, but you can simply see that. It's just an outline of a person. You can't distinguish that it's Scott or any one of you. So that also helped the city mitigate its issues and concerns from, for example, the ACLU and other agencies. And then the last one, again, was really partnering with LAFD to understand how we incorporate this and operationalize it with them. in a way that made the most sense, and also to enable them to make some changes on the fly. So for example, this fire, rather the requirement was any fire over 200 degrees Celsius to start with, but we had some false positives, like the exhaust of buses would set it off. And so we worked with them to increase the temperature, which we could do quite easily, and then also geofence some of the areas so they weren't being displayed. So really, again, it's about partnering with entities to understand what the need is and providing a solution that really helps them solve the issue at hand. Down below on the bottom right, similar scenario. This was prior to the actual deployment in the city. This was really to prove out to the LAFD that it worked, because they saw the PowerPoint, they heard me speak, they said both are interesting, but Scott, I want you to prove it. So we brought our team to Drill Tower 86. I think it was back in August of last year, nice and warm. And we set up the solution about 35 feet in the air to resemble roughly a typical pole in a city. And about 150 feet away, they started a fire in the drill tower. And again, it sent an alert about 2 minutes before you could visibly see any smoke or flames. And so that was really the aha moment, if you will, for both the chief of fire prevention and the CTO to say, hey, this is significant. A 2-minute head start is really beneficial. Let's go ahead and deploy this in the city and see what kind of benefit it can provide. So since then, we've partnered and spoken with a few other agencies. We participated in the Wildfire Technology Summit in Sacramento about a month ago. We've spoken with Senator Stern in his office for Ventura and LA County. We since enabled this solution to work independent of a power source. So it's now powered via solar-powered batteries. And naturally, with T-Mobile being the connectivity component of this, it can work really independent of anything. It could sit anywhere, and we're confident it could help in terms of mitigating proactively those concerns of certainly early-stage fires. And I'm sure many of you are familiar with this, the statistic that fires typically double in size about every 30 seconds to 1 minute. So, every minute truly counts in this case. So if we can help and partner with any of you to solve issues like this, or again, proactively identify fires and mitigate that risk, we'd be happy to talk. A few details about the solution itself. We currently work with Nokia as our system integrator partner. So they work with a few different providers of solutions, but this is really a ruggedized outdoor thermal imaging sensor that can see up to about 5 kilometers, so 3 miles line of sight if it was sitting on top of a power line or a pole, paired with a gateway, as well as some intelligence at the edge, which allows it to process a lot of the thermal images that it utilizes. We also pair this with an environmental monitor to understand the impact of environmental conditions in and around a fire. And then the city asked, what else is possible? This is great. It proved successful. The pilot was helpful. They're now evaluating, how they're going to deploy it more broadly in which areas. But we also brought to them, if you need help, for example, with a ruggedized drone that could actually help, extinguish fires, we have partners in that space as well. So really, it's about understanding what your needs are and truly partnering and listening and then solving those. So again, just some of the key benefits of this particular solution. Obviously, increasing situational awareness, providing those real-time alerts versus a video camera, which I think is really helpful and does provide some situational awareness. But I think paired with something like this could be even stronger, because then you have that alerting mechanism and no reliance on an individual to have to tell you. It will tell you the moment it detects something based on the parameters you decide. The communication I heard as well was quite an issue, especially across agencies or even within some agencies, was a challenge during the Woolsey fire. So notifications can be sent to 10 people, 100, 10,000 people if necessary. Whoever is identified as the people who need to know, this can certainly be communicated with various agencies quite easily. Again, something that we've proven last year with the city of LA, something that we'll be happy to deploy relatively quickly. As much as we appreciate the opportunity to participate in the RFII that I alluded to earlier, they don't plan to really deploy a solution until early 2020, which I understand they have to evaluate various solutions and understand which ones are scalable and how they can be supported. But I'd be excited to partner with anybody who really wants to make an impact prior to this year's upcoming fire season. As I mentioned, it's independent, could work outside of a power source, or it could be paired with a power source. So in the event that it is paired on a light, and then one of the utilities, if you decide to de-energize, it could still operate and work independent of that power source via the solar-powered batteries. And then again, the flexibility in terms of incorporating other solutions with that, like environmental monitoring or video, happy to support, just need to know what you need. So again, happy to talk about how we can engage in a pilot or a POC and really work to increase the proactive nature of preventing fires, or as soon as they happen, to provide that alerting mechanism by which they can be prevented more quickly and faster. And then, as mentioned also, to showcase the results of a POC, we can certainly partner with our communications team and help showcase some of the results of this. And to that point, I have just a brief video to show of what we did in LA that could help bring this to life a little more, so you can relax for a couple minutes, enjoy your coffees, and have a look.
I was pulled aside by the fire department, and they said, "Ted, we have a serious issue." There's an increase in fires in Los Angeles, especially in the Skid Row neighborhood. The fire department requested some technology solutions for us to very quickly identify that there's a fire, so we can respond very quickly and ensure that a small fire stays a small fire. We reached out to T-Mobile and to Nokia and said, could thermal imaging be an appropriate way of approaching this?
The city of LA turned to us to understand what options were available in order to achieve the results they needed. This solution was created in such a way that's specific to the challenges that the city of LA has.
The solution consists of 4 main components: the thermal imaging sensor, which is the key to detect the fire. The second thing is the LTE gateway, which is connected to T-Mobile network. And then we have the cloud application from Nokia, where we have the intelligence of software that can do the configuration of thresholds of the fire sensing capabilities. And we have the dashboard where the city or the fire department can look into it exactly where the fire is happening.
The tests that we did at a fire station just recently were an excellent example of how the solution will work very, very well as it's being deployed in our cityscape.
The thermal imaging sensor was able to detect the fire in approximately 2 minutes before you could physically see any smoke or fire.
This is a great example of if you can kind of pack intelligence down at the edge so that a sensor is able to take a very complex environment and instead of just monitoring it, actually be able to measure and put some sort of judgment into what's happening and when you need to pay attention to it. If you can get a first responder out the door 30 seconds faster, that's a big, big difference. If you're talking about 2 minutes, that's a game-changing difference.
IoT solutions present one of the greatest opportunities for how to manage a smart city. Our ability to get sensors into different parts of the city, whether it's related to parking, whether it's related to reducing traffic, whether it's related to fighting crime, or in this case, preventing fires, it's an extremely important capability that allows us to change the way that we manage a city.
Great. Thank you.
Hello and good afternoon. Oh, we got to try this again. Good afternoon. There we go. We got it. I'm George Karianis. I lead our Connected and Resilient Communities business at Panasonic. Panasonic has many things, most of which are not what you're thinking of. We're not here to talk about TVs. And we really don't like the phrase smart cities, right? It's vendor driven. It means nothing because it means something different to everyone. We define smart cities as really what the collection of stakeholders in a region define as important. Typically, that's the city, the utility, the transit agency, the real estate developers of consequence. So I've got a lot of information I'm going to move through very briskly, try to make up some time as well, so buckle up. This is what I think you should be thinking about and your city leaders should be thinking about differently going forward. Multi-stakeholder integrated planning, having the utility, the developer, the city, and the transit agencies, not just to the same table, but to the same side of the table. That's the real magic in unlocking the potential of smart cities. If you can never be too fat, too rich, or have too much fiber. So every time you trench, lay more conduit, lay more dark fiber, light it up if you're bold enough. Very few cities are ready for 5G, I will tell you that. They think of, many cities think of smart street lighting as, it used to be about the luminaire and the controller on it. Now it's really about the strategic value of that vertical real estate and the value of that public right-of-way, which is so misunderstood and undervalued in too many communities. Social equity is rising to the top of many cities. How do you close that social equity gap? Workforce housing is a challenge in many cities that we talk to. We'll touch on what that means. Same thing with community resiliency, mobility and transit, autonomy, the electrification, the connected vehicle wave coming at cities and utilities offers you a tremendous opportunity for innovation. And that's really what I want to talk about is applied innovation today, really driving to economic development, which really goes to quality of life. Your cities compete on a quality of life basis with other cities and your region with other regions. How do you improve your quality of life so that you attract that next corporation or family that's moving? And in the context of this, how can your communities dramatically reduce your carbon footprint? So that's the context of topics I want you guys to think about, your cities, your utilities to be thinking about. This is the anaconda to me. This is a quote from Ray Kurzweil, inventor, author, Google fellow. He claims that this century will bring not 100 years of change, but 20,000 years of change. That is staggering. That is, it's almost silly to think about that. But if you do think about it, mobility in the next decade is going to change. It's already changing rapidly. In this next decade, mobility will never be the same. In 20 years, in 2 decades, money will never be the same, right? It used to be analog and centrally controlled. Now it's going to be completely digital and completely decentralized. In 3 decades, autonomy will merge more fully with AI, and civilization will never be the same. So the point here is your organizations need to be adaptable. And that's really going to be the metric of survival going forward. Climate change is real. It's here. It's upon us. And we cannot fathom what it's going to look like. I love this. This is Hurricane Ophelia that hit Ireland. Furthest east a hurricane has ever hit. You know, the wisdom of mankind went into the model for this, you know, over years and years, and they never contemplated a hurricane going this far east or this far north. It's indicative of the unpredictability of the climate impact. From a utility perspective, if you're not worried about Shell, Engie, Total, you should be. They're coming for your best customers. Why is Panasonic in this smart city, smart community market? About 20 years ago, we started creating the world's most resilient community. It's outside of Tokyo. 45-acre manufacturing compound is obsolete. We bladed it. We created Fujisawa Sustainable Smart Town with a bunch of stakeholders. It's always about stakeholder alignment to us. You always lead with stakeholder alignment, which then unlocks the public-private partnership financing potential, which then leads to impactful projects. And stakeholder alignment sounds obvious. Of course we do it. Of course we want to do it. Doing this at city scale is the hardest thing I have ever done in my life. So Fujisawa, 7-day microgrid, I call it the world's most resilient community. What's really amazing? Technology is nowhere. It's embedded into the fabric. It looks and feels like a normal community. That was my first big aha. So it's 7-day microgrid. Every home has 3 days food and water. Just highlight very quickly, park benches convert to barbecue grills, right? That's not for your Saturday picnic. This is a highly resilient community. So in North America, we stood up our City Now, our smart city business, 3.5 years ago in Denver. We chose Denver over 24 other cities because of the collection of stakeholders you see here that were aligned around a broad vision to be more sustainable and more impactful as a region. So the stakeholders came together. We anchor a 400-acre transit-oriented development called Peña Station Next. It's right outside the airport. Anyone who comes to or through Denver, it's an open invitation to please come and visit. We love to help organizations understand what the Denver region has done and is doing in terms of applied innovation. And I like this slide because it shows the unplanned innovation that came from this stakeholder alignment. We came together initially and we agreed, oh, we're going to have a net zero microgrid, we're going to have smart streetlights, we're going to do community Wi-Fi. Okay, so we started and we ran fast. And when I say stakeholder alignment with the utility, with the city, with transit agencies, Colorado Department of Transportation, these are large, complex organizations, and we only make this progress together. Right? This is not a Panasonic statement. This is what we as stakeholders have done together. So what we didn't anticipate and what we have unleashed in terms of innovation and P3 projects, we have the first in the country deployment statewide of connected vehicle technology. We have the first autonomous electric shuttle operating on city streets between first mile of train station and a bus stop, first mile, last mile. We have the first carbon neutral planning tool to help get developments carbon neutral. And we are about to, there's so many, I forget some of these things. But the point is, when you bring these stakeholders together for a discrete set of innovation, that's good and necessary, but it's the unanticipated outcome of that. We're first community resiliency pavilion that we're going to be deploying here. So it's about that unforeseen, unexpected wave of innovation when you get this right. This is an aerial view of it. You'll have access to these slides, so some of these slides are really for your reference. I'm not going to cover them. Ton of technology, but it's not about technology. This is about a living lab for innovation, for not just evaluating technology, but how can we help each of the stakeholders innovate their business model? Because if you don't solve the business model problem, this just stays good ideas. Since you're utilities, I included a picture of our microgrid, 17 months from concept to completion, which is pretty grease lightning. Xcel had 3 failed PUC applications before that, 15 contracts. So when you talk about stakeholder alignment at this scale and at this speed, it is enormous complexity. And so that's really a testament to how quickly we move together. This is the Colorado Department of Transportation Road X program. This is the connected vehicle platform. Connected vehicles will impact our lives far quicker and with far more impact than autonomy in the next 10 years. By 2022, 3 short years, over 100 million connected vehicles will be on the road. We are building that, and no cloud infrastructure can handle the data expected from these vehicles, 150 petabytes a year. Just staggering, right? And so we're building the data platform, open API, that will take this data in, analyze it in real time, and push it out. I mention this because it is, again, it is probably the most transformational project Panasonic has done in its 100-year history when you think about 40,000 deaths a year on our roadways. And connected vehicles are expected to reduce that 3/4, right? So we're, and then we also view the connected vehicle as a forerunner of distributed resources, right, at very large scale. So Xcel came to us and said, this is an applied innovation example for utility. Xcel Energy came to us and said, our communities hate batteries in the right of way, right? Can you help us? Can you shove some batteries in this city pole, in this smart IoT 5G pole? They're a partner of ours, we like them. And so we put some batteries in the base of the pole. Down here, right? And we went back to Xcel and we said, we did what you asked us to. And then they thought about it. They said, no, that's not good enough. We don't want batteries above ground. Cars are going to hit these things. We don't want that. So we worked with city pole folks, and we came up with this concept of a 50 kilowatt hour battery module underground in the right of way, so it's out of sight, thermally controlled naturally. And it can use a street light or not, but the business model here is really about 5G backup. The carriers, T-Mobile, AT&T, Verizon, they're investing billions in 5G infrastructure, but they don't really want to invest in batteries. So it's a great business model opportunity for utilities for new service revenue while still deploying distributed storage and getting grid services value from that. And then from there, we realized, gee, if you don't have the pole, right, you can put the pole there if you want to, or you can just put the battery in the right of way. Then if you added a solar canopy, now you've got a complete microgrid, fits into a community park aesthetic, And if you had added outdoor rated furniture and some outdoor rated AC and USB plugs, now you actually have a community resiliency pavilion. So not only can we help utilities and cities keep 5G, a small number of 5G small cells working during a prolonged power outage, but now we can also help charge your devices, because in these emergency situations, you care about one thing only, right? It's texting your loved ones. Are you okay? Right? That's what you care about. And so you need to be able to communicate, and you need to be able to communicate both at the network level and at the device level. And so we're not a product company. Our team is not a product company. We're a strategic consulting team. We've developed this concept with utilities, for utilities. We're going to pilot it this year. If they like it as we expect it, we'll stand up a business. But we're not here to sell batteries, even though we are Panasonic. We're really here to help utilities and cities innovate. And then the bottom picture is a fueling station of the future. DC fast charging is coming faster than any of you probably realize. So accelerate your plans. I talk very directly, sorry. You may want to consider accelerating your plans. They'll be nicer. This space is so complex, so confusing. Even in our own team, we were talking past each other when we say smart streetlights. It meant something different to everybody on the team. So we created our own studio backlot, right? This is, at Pena, this is our innovation showcase. It's got a mobility district, a commercial business district, sports and entertainment district. It's got a public right-of-way with street lighting, EV charging, smart trash cans, right? This is really a conference room. It's an immersive and interactive conference room. And so this has been very helpful because we can pilot any smart home, smart building, smart grid, smart city application. That's nice, but the real impact here, we bring stakeholders in here and we make them use the same words to mean the same thing. That sounds like blocking and tackling, right? It sounds like kindergarten, right? In this space, it is essential because when they leave after our training, they're all on the same line of the same page of the same hymnal, and they're just much more effective at planning. And again, this isn't just within a utility or a city. This is bringing the city, the utility, the developers of consequence together, the transit agency, so that they can then go forth and innovate as a whole. This is an example of, we've got a 320 square foot micro unit in there talking about workforce housing. Workforce housing has to be smaller, right? It's smaller space living. We built this to help cities and developers understand that small space doesn't have to be crappy, right? And then from a utility perspective, multifamily, right? This is multifamily. If you have a single family house, you can afford to put a Tesla Powerwall in your garage. Super, great, knock yourself out. But in a multifamily, how do utilities, how do cities, aside from workforce housing, how do you provide community resiliency in a multifamily mode? And so this is a concept of a residential energy storage appliance, a battery that goes in the unit. It would show up via FedEx or UPS. You plug it into the outlet. It creates a microgrid within the unit, right? Back up your cell phone, back up your laptop, and a high-efficiency fridge for 2-3 days. The point being, utilities could own this asset, rate base it, if they're investor-owned, use on-bill financing. So it's a way to, again, solve these complex problems by figuring out the business models. This is a result of utility training that we had in the showcase. This is something we're very proud of. This is turning the aircraft carrier. This is getting this utility to, it's an investor-owned utility, so their vision for smart cities is serving their municipal and their real estate developers significantly differently and innovating and providing new sources of revenue. So these are smart folks, and it's not that we increase the education on any one of these application lines. That's interesting. But when they can understand all of these topics in context, then they become a very valuable resource to their customers, because vendors are beating on cities every day, right? Buy my thing, buy my shiny thing, buy my shiny thing. And cities are like, what the heck am I supposed to do, right? So as trusted, you guys are trusted partners to your cities because you're municipals in particular. So understanding all of this in context is really helpful. We help utilities innovate. This is the business model framework for how we do it. It's a handout. You've got it in the slides. I don't want to go through that, especially since we want to catch up on some time. But this is how we help utilities innovate deeply. And then we also help cities. Let me get through this. Sorry about the build. This is a city that happens to be San Luis Obispo, 40,000 people. They have a goal of being carbon neutral by 2035, the most ambitious goal in the country, probably one and among the world. And so they're pretty sophisticated, especially for a 40,000 person city. And they've got a lot of activity, but like almost every city, almost every utility we talk to, they're like, we know where we want to get to, but we don't know how to get there, right? We know the end goal, but we don't know how to get there. So we have a model for how we help cities and utilities crawl, walk, run in this journey, because it really is about implementation and being a part of that stakeholder group. And we essentially infect it with a virus that is very innovative, right? We really create this seed of innovation across the stakeholders. That's our impact. And again, you guys have these handouts. I wanted to make up some time, so thank you very, very much.
Thank you very much. Very enlightening. Thank you, Mike, for filling in for me earlier. With that, do we have anybody with any questions for our guests? Do we have a mic out there? I see that somebody's standing up.
So my question actually for you, all you guys actually has to do with customer adoption. And primarily on a couple of things. You guys, for instance, you mentioned the great success that you guys have had with your app, as pertains to, let's say, homelessness and ensuring that street lights are put in places where they're happening. But how do you know that you're ensuring that more marginalized groups of your community are aware of these applications? And this sort of goes in place with a lot of other things that teams do, utilizing this new technology. How are you ensuring that your rate base is actually becoming knowledgeable enough to fully utilize all these capabilities?
So I heard most of that question. I think for us in Anaheim, we do a pretty good job community-wide of pushing out different types of technology solutions for our entire, because we're talking about 6 districts now in Anaheim. We've actually gone to district-based city council. And so we work closely with our different partners, different departments, as well as our council members. And sometimes we have targeted outreach. So they will hear a lot from their communities about whatever the particular issue is. And it's not uncommon for myself and some of my engineers to do nighttime walks, for example, in an area where they feel like lighting is not sufficient. And we'll do a survey as we walk through, and we do a multi-department walk with police, code enforcement, and a few other agencies, and we'll wrap through that entire neighborhood and identify things that need servicing. So that's one way we do outreach to those folks. In terms of technology, most people now have smartphones, and so we always push out the message that between Anaheim Anytime and the app, that they could directly request information, and if they can't get the service that they need, they have direct communications with their council member.
And I would add, from a community, from a social equity perspective, because that's really, I think, the root of your question. If you think back to that community resiliency pavilion that we talked about, we're working with the utility to deploy that in a disadvantaged part of the city. And the point being, it's free electricity, right? Because you can't, when you really need it, no one's going to come, right? And because there just can't. And so I've had incredibly positive feedback from everyone I've shown that concept to. And one woman, she's like, that'll attract the homeless. And I looked her dead in the eye and I said, well, when you need this, you're all homeless. And then I also shared it with City of San Jose, and they looked at it and they said, this could help us serve our homeless, right? So it really is about the city leadership and how do they want to deploy assets that bridge that social divide, whether it's technical or not.
Can I add something? I'm working in a really unique pilot right now in a part of the country where the stakeholder group and the utility are for the first time sitting on the same side of the table in terms of developing a smart roadmap. And it's really quite interesting. And it happened completely coincidentally. It's because the low income advocate decided to invest in a technology demonstration area. Their point being that low-income customers were high users of mobile technology and emerging technology, and the utility was trying to build a business case around smart home. And I just happened to be involved in both projects and brought them together, and it's revolutionary. And what we're doing is working with a stakeholder directly to develop the plan. And I think historically, utilities and the stakeholder groups don't always have the best relationships. There's usually on the opposite sides of the table, right? So the idea of a utility being proactive and reaching out to the stakeholder groups to form that conversation, to have the communication, it goes a long way. Just the request to have those conversations about what's important to you. It's amazing how frequently that doesn't get done, and how something as simple as that can alleviate large-term deployment barriers later. So a lot of these are really soft issues and not technology problems.
So any more questions from anyone? All right, back center. Take that on.
Do you want to start?
I'll jump in.
Yeah.
So I think, quite frankly, as T-Mobile, we have a pretty solid public sector team, and we're heavily involved with local, city, county, state, various municipalities. But really, our perspective is to partner with folks like the city of Anaheim and the example he shared, where you have traditionally what some of the cell sites have looked like, and then what it's going to look like in the future is when you partner with a city and understand how could we hide more of the small cell infrastructure in order to support all the communication services that all of you want and need, but do it in a way that's more amenable and visually attractive. I think we're quite frankly open to doing that, especially as how we consider ourselves the Un-carrier. We want to come across as different. We want to do things a little bit differently. And certainly show up in a way that's amenable to the public and to the city agencies.
And I would just add to that we've been very intentional about working with our carriers to make sure that residential concerns, it's usually not the businesses who are concerned, it's when you start getting into neighborhoods, finding locations that work for their purposes as well as with the community. That's key. So if it means you put it on a different side of the street or maybe 3 street lights down, between utilities, public works, and the city team, we try to work with the carrier to explain, hey, there's probably going to be some concerns here. Can you go to this other location? And so far, that's helped quite a bit to address some of those concerns.
I just want to add something. What I haven't heard is talking to customers directly. I was involved in the first smart meter deployment after Berkeley, California, and the resistance there. And there was so much edge around, oh my God, how much resistance are we going to have to technology deployment? What type of, what's the customer reaction going to be? And we had focus groups, and we talked to consumers, and we just spoke in their language. And one guy says to me, are you telling me that we can take control of our energy use because we can see the data? And I said, yes, that's the message. And they ended up going to market with the take control of your energy use. Well, I can't tell you how many utilities across the country have used take control of your energy use as your AMI tagline, right? But that all came from talking to a customer very directly, and by eliminating the fear and being more direct with consumers and transparent and getting them excited about the technology made all the difference in that deployment.
Wait a second.
I can't hear.
Can you hear? We can't hear you, so you have to
Addressing
wait
the-
for the mic.
Addressing the concerns that people have, maybe.
I guess the kind of question I was going for was the health concerns and those types of things that the public are perceiving, whether they're real or not, that we've had to deal with regarding electromagnetic fields and other things of that nature. You know, when you're trying to put these infrastructures into place, and someone sees an antenna, whether it looks nice and it's pretty or it's hidden, if they know it's there, you know, I don't want this thing near me and causing brain cancer and everything else. So I'm just curious as to people that are really involved in the smart cities, how they're handling those types of scenarios.
Could I just follow up on the AMI thing, because it's very directly related to that also? I would just say that, oh my God, I just lost my train of thought. Being proactive and transparent and articulating the benefits. I think I just can't emphasize enough how part of the issue with the early AMI deployments, and even the later ones, apparently they don't all read what's going on in the industry, is that utilities are leading with utility benefits, operational benefits. You tell me that you can put out a wildfire by my house, like so I don't die or my house doesn't burn down because you put up this technology, I will quickly alleviate many of my concerns. So making sure that you articulate very clearly and raise the value of those benefits and focus on the consumer around this technology is key to the acceptance and adoption of this smart city concept.
We consider it stakeholder alignment, right? Citizens and citizen groups are just one of the many stakeholders. And there's always going to be those who resist change. And to the point, if you can articulate these solutions and these investments and these alliances and these initiatives in meaningful outcomes, then you're going to mitigate the naysayers, but you're always going to have naysayers. You just got to deal with that.
We have time for more.
No, actually, thank you very much. We're out of time. George, if you could, ask everyone to thank the panel for the great presentations.
Great job.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nice meeting you. Thank you. When do you leave?
All right, folks. We are into our break time, so we're going to skip the Cahoots game, but stick around for the last panel of the day, which will start at 2:45, because there will be extra prizes given away at that game, okay? So enjoy your break. We'll be back here 2:45 sharp. Thank you.